She said it was a one-time mistake, but that mistake was his brother, and now, I can never unsee what I saw. Emma stood in front of the large window, staring out at the sprawling city below. The sky had begun to turn a shade of amber as the sun dipped lower, casting a soft glow on the rooftops of the neighborhood. From this vantage point, everything seemed perfect. The apartment was luxurious, filled with carefully chosen decor and the faint scent of jasmine from the flowers that James had bought her on their anniversary. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt like a distant dream, one that Emma no longer recognized as her own. She ran her fingers along the glass, feeling the coolness of the surface, a stark contrast to the heat building within her. Beneath the stillness of the scene, there was a storm inside her. The facade she had built around herself, the life she had meticulously crafted with James, felt like a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse with the slightest movement. Emma had once believed in the picture-perfect life. The kind of life that everyone envied from the outside, the successful husband, the career she could proudly talk about at dinners, the beautiful home that made her feel like she had it all. But in the stillness of the night, when the noise of the world faded away, the cracks began to show. The passion that had once sparked between her and James had long since burned out, leaving a cold, empty space between them. It wasn't that James was unkind, no, he was everything she had ever dreamed of, respectful, intelligent, and capable. But somewhere along the way, she had lost herself in the process. The worst part was that James didn't even know. He had no idea that their love was crumbling. He continued to bring her flowers, continued to plan their future with the same enthusiasm as when they had first met, but the truth was that she no longer saw him the same way. It wasn't his fault. She knew that. The fault was hers for allowing the silence to creep in, for accepting a life that, while comfortable, lacked the one thing she couldn't ignore, connection. She glanced down at her phone. There was a message from James. "I'll be home in an hour." I picked up so she couldn't help but smile at his thoughtful gesture. He was always kind, always considerate. But that's all he was now, a shadow of the man she once adored. She felt a pang of guilt, but the truth was, no matter how much she loved him, something was missing. And it wasn't just physical, it was emotional, deep in her core. It was a quiet yearning for something she couldn't explain. She put the phone down and walked to the kitchen to prepare a light salad. As she cut the vegetables, her mind wandered back to last week when she had met Nathan. It had been an innocent encounter, really, a simple dinner at James' family home where Nathan, who had been living abroad for a few years, had come to visit. She remembered how he had walked into the room. His presence filling the space immediately, commanding attention without trying. His dark eyes, full of intensity and curiosity, met hers and held for a second too long. A flicker of something stirred within her. Nathan was different. He was passionate in a way that James had never been. His free-spirited nature was like a spark to her, igniting a fire she hadn't known she had. Where James was measured and calm, Nathan was daring, intense. He spoke with such energy, his ideas flowing in a way that made her feel alive. They hadn't spoken much that night, just the casual exchanges you'd expect from relatives. But there was something in his gaze, something that lingered when their eyes met. Something that made her pulse race. Even now, days later, as the minutes passed, Emma couldn't shake the memory of that fleeting glance. There had been a connection. Not just the casual kind of connection you had with people you met through your spouse, but something deeper. Something electric. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. This wasn't her. She wasn't the type of person who would entertain thoughts like this, thoughts about someone who wasn't her husband. She was faithful. She loved James. And yet, every time she thought of Nathan, a part of her felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. She felt guilty for even acknowledging it, for entertaining the idea that there might be something more than what she had with James. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. James' voice drifted in from the hallway. "Emma. I'm home." His voice was light, full of warmth, as it always was, but it was as if something in the air had shifted, subtle, but there nonetheless. She greeted him with a smile and a quick hug, feeling the familiar comfort of his embrace, yet something was different. A quiet discomfort settled in her chest as they sat down to eat. The conversation was easy enough, just the usual topics about work and family. But beneath the surface of their casual words, Emma felt the divide growing, the emotional gulf widening. James looked at her across the table, his eyes filled with affection. "You've been quiet tonight. Everything okay?" She smiled, but it felt forced. "I'm fine, just tired," she replied, hoping the excuse would be enough. But deep down, she knew she wasn't fine. She hadn't been for a long time. The next few days passed in a blur of routine, the subtle tension in the air between Emma and James growing more palpable with each passing hour. They went about their lives, but there was a quiet distance between them that neither of them acknowledged. James had insisted on the weekend getaway, and though Emma had agreed, the thought of spending time alone with him felt hollow, a reminder of what had been lost, and what was still buried deep within her. The trip had been planned for weeks. A weekend in a quiet coastal town, just the two of them. James had booked a charming, secluded villa overlooking the ocean, she had never considered herself someone who would be unfaithful, but the pull of desire, the yearning for something more, had become harder to ignore. Nathan had become an almost constant presence. As the day of their departure approached, Emma found herself caught between two worlds. On one hand, there was James, the man who had given her a life of comfort, stability, and respect. He loved her deeply, and despite their growing emotional distance, he still reached out to her with affection, still tried to keep their connection alive. On the other hand, there was the growing attraction to Nathan, whose unpredictable charm pulled her into his orbit. Their last encounter, the quiet moments they had shared, talking, laughing, exchanging glances that lingered just a second too long, had left a mark on her. The pull was undeniable. "Emma," he began quietly, putting his coffee cup down, "we need to talk." Emma froze, her heart rate picking up. She had known this conversation was coming. "What is it, James?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About what we're going through. I know I've been distant, and I don't want to lose you. I don't want us to end up as strangers, Emma." His words pierced her heart, stirring the love she still had for him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to return to the simple life they had once had, before the complications, before Nathan's touch had changed everything. But every time she looked at him, she saw his love for her, the dedication he gave her, but it wasn't enough to quiet the yearning inside her. And every time she thought of Nathan, a part of her wanted to run toward him, to throw caution to the wind and live for herself, not for the role she had been playing for so long. Emma started, her voice faltering. She didn't know how to say the words, didn't know how to explain the depth of the chasm between them. "I need more, James. More than what we have. And I don't know if I can find it with you anymore." James's face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean? What more do you need?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Emma wanted to scream, to tell him everything, about Nathan, about the part of her that had been awakened, about the impossible pull she felt towards him. But she couldn't. The guilt was too much, and James was still her husband, the man she had promised her life to. "I don't know," she finally admitted, her voice a whisper. "I just don't know anymore." James nodded slowly, his face hardening as he stood up, the quiet of the room settling between them like a cold wall. "I see," he said quietly. "You've already made your decision, haven't you?" Emma's heart broke at the sight of him retreating, of the man she had loved now looking at her with a mixture of sadness and betrayal. She had known this would hurt him, but she hadn't anticipated the depth of the pain it would cause him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never meant for it to be this way." James shook his head, his face filled with disbelief. "You've already made your choice, haven't you? You don't need to lie to me anymore, Emma." The rest of the evening passed in silence, the space between them filled with the unspoken truths neither of them were ready to face. The trip was looming. And Emma found herself both dreading and anticipating the weekend away. It was meant to be a fresh start for her and James, a chance to reconnect. But as the days drew nearer, the reality of her emotional turmoil intensified. She could no longer pretend things were fine, nor could she ignore the burning desire to see Nathan again. That evening, after dinner, Emma sat alone in the living room, her thoughts a whirlwind of guilt, longing, and confusion. The pull to Nathan was unbearable. The craving to be near him, to feel that connection again, had only grown stronger. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from him. "I miss you. I can't stop thinking about you. I want to see you again." The word sent a shiver down her spine, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel the rush of excitement. She couldn't deny it any longer. She needed to see him. The message lingered in her mind for the rest of the night, the words echoing in her thoughts. Emma knew that responding would change everything. It would make everything real, no more pretending, no more living in the shadows of her own desires. With trembling hands, she typed a response, "I'll meet you soon." The moment she sent the message, she felt a deep sense of finality. The path she had been walking down had led her to this moment, and there was no turning back. The days following Emma's impulsive message to Nathan were filled with a heavy anticipation, her mind constantly swirling with guilt and desire. She couldn't escape the feeling that her life was slipping away from her, piece by piece. Every time she saw James, his warmth, his genuine care for her, it was as though another layer of her own guilt was peeled away. She had crossed a line, and the silence that had grown between her and James was now thick with the weight of things unsaid. She had always prided herself on being able to maintain control, to live a life dictated by reason and responsibility. But the connection she had with Nathan was undeniable, and no matter how much she tried to push it down, it kept resurfacing with a force she couldn't ignore. Every conversation, every lingering look, every shared smile between her and Nathan was like a spark that fed an already raging fire inside her. That evening, after yet another quiet dinner with James, Emma sat on the balcony, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. The sounds of the city felt distant, almost muted, as her mind wandered back to that fateful night she had spent with Nathan. The feeling of his touch, the intensity of their kiss, and the way he had made her feel, seen, wanted, and free, had been like a breath of fresh air in a life that had become suffocating. She thought of James, of how he still loved her with that unshakable devotion, how he was still trying to save their marriage, though she had already begun to walk away, step by painful step. He didn't deserve this. He deserved someone who could give him their whole heart, not a fractured piece that was divided between duty and longing. But the pull she felt for Nathan was becoming too strong to resist. James returned home late that night, his steps echoing through the quiet apartment. Emma was waiting for him in the living room, her thoughts still lingering on her conversation with Nathan earlier that day. The moment she saw James, a wave of guilt washed over her, but she quickly forced a smile. "I didn't expect you home so late," she said, her voice a little too light, a little too forced. James smiled back, though there was a tiredness in his eyes. "I had a late meeting. I'm sorry I didn't let you know. How was your evening?" Emma hesitated for a moment. The question was innocent, but it felt like a trap. Every moment they spent together now seemed to highlight how far apart they had grown. How had she ended up here? So far from where she thought she would be. "It was fine," Emma replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. "I've just been thinking a lot, James." He nodded, his expression softening with concern. "I understand. We both have a lot to work through, don't we?" Emma forced herself to look him in the eye, but the words caught in her throat. The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache, but it also made the truth more difficult to bear. She couldn't keep lying to him, not when everything was about to change. But how could she admit that her heart had already shifted elsewhere? "I think we need to talk about where we are," James continued, his tone serious now. "I don't want to lose you, Emma. I've been trying to give you space, but I can feel you slipping away. I need to know if there's hope for us. Do you still want to make this work?" The question hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken emotions. Emma's heart raced, the words she had been avoiding now threatening to spill out. She wanted to tell him the truth, to tell him about Nathan, about the pull she felt towards him. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. The shame was overwhelming. "I'm not sure," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I want anymore, James." James's face fell, and for a brief moment, Emma saw the raw pain in his eyes. "I just need you to be honest with me, Emma. If you don't feel the same, if you're not happy, then we need to face that. But I can't keep pretending that things are okay when they aren't." Emma closed her eyes, the guilt suffocating her. She had always thought she could be the perfect wife, the perfect partner, but now she realized that she had been holding on to a life that wasn't truly hers. The connection she had once felt for James had faded into something cold, something hollow, and no matter how much she wanted to fix it, she couldn't go back. "I'm sorry, James," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending. I'm not the same person I was when we started this." James didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at her, his face a mixture of sadness and disbelief. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "I see. I guess I've been holding on to a version of you that's no longer real." Emma stood, her legs feeling like jelly beneath her. She wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but she knew it would only make things worse. She had already made her choice, and now, she had to live with the consequences. Later that evening, after James had gone to bed, Emma sat alone in the living room, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had made. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. There was a message from Nathan, waiting for her. "I need to see you again. I'm coming over." Emma's chest tightened, and for the briefest moment, she considered not replying. But she knew deep down that she was already too far gone. She had already made her choice. The life she had built with James was slipping away, and now, there was only Nathan. She typed back a simple response, "I'll be waiting." The moment she hit send, she felt a strange sense of finality wash over her. She was no longer the woman who had promised herself to James. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The life she had once known was gone, replaced by something raw, something dangerous, something real. The following days unfolded in a haze of confusion, guilt, and desire. Emma knew the life she had built with James was slipping through her fingers, but no matter how hard she tried to hold on to it, the pull toward Nathan grew stronger with each passing moment. She had betrayed her own convictions, and though she had once believed that love was simple, a bond of mutual respect and shared dreams, she now realized it was far more complex, far more fragile than she had ever imagined. The mornings were the hardest. When she woke beside James, his warmth still a comfort, she felt the weight of the lies she had built between them. He would roll over in the morning, his arms finding their way around her, and she would close her eyes, pretending for just a moment that everything was the way it used to be. But it wasn't. She wasn't the same person anymore. James had become a shadow of the man she once adored. And Nathan? Nathan was a bright flame in the distance, a temptation she couldn't seem to outrun. He had sparked something inside her that she hadn't even realized was missing, the desire to live freely, to be unapologetically herself. And it had cost her everything. Every interaction with James now felt like an act. Their conversations, once lively and full of promise, had turned into obligatory exchanges about daily life, work, and the future. There was no longer any spark between them, and the idea of returning to the life they once shared seemed like an impossible task. Emma had tried to give him the same love, the same warmth, but it had withered in her heart. The longer they went without addressing the chasm growing between them, the more she felt like a stranger in her own home. On Thursday afternoon, James asked her to meet him for lunch. Emma had been in a daze all morning, her thoughts consumed by the conversation they had avoided for so long. She had already made her decision, but seeing James had become more difficult with each passing day. He still had no idea what was coming. The restaurant they went to was their usual spot, a quiet Italian bistro tucked away in a corner of the city. They sat across from one another, the soft hum of conversation around them making the tension between them feel even more pronounced. James, ever the optimist, smiled at her, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Emma," he began, his voice a little softer than usual. "We've been through a lot, but I still believe in us. I want to make things work, whatever it takes." Emma stared at him, the love she had once felt for him slowly turning to a dull ache in her chest. She had always admired his unwavering determination, his ability to fight for the people he loved, but now, it felt like a battle she could no longer fight. "I don't know if I can do that anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "James, I've been lying to you. I've been lying to myself." His brow furrowed with concern. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Emma closed her eyes for a moment, collecting her thoughts. She had to tell him the truth, even though every part of her wanted to avoid it. She had been carrying this weight for far too long, and now it was time to set it down. "I'm not the same person I was when we first got together. And I don't think I can go back to being that person for you." She paused, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the table. "There's someone else, James. Someone who makes me feel alive in ways that I haven't felt in years." James's face paled, the color draining from his cheeks as his eyes searched hers, looking for any hint of doubt, any sign that this was just a fleeting moment of confusion. But Emma knew it wasn't. She had already crossed that line. "Who is it?" His voice was raw, his grip on the table tightening as if he needed something to hold on to. "It's Nathan," Emma whispered, the words finally leaving her mouth. She had never expected to say it out loud, but now that she had, the truth felt too heavy to carry. The silence that followed was deafening. James sat there, frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and hurt. His eyes darted between her and the table, as if he couldn't quite comprehend the words that had just left her lips. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I'm so sorry," Emma said, the tears finally spilling over. "I never wanted to hurt you. But this is who I am now. I've changed. I don't know how to go back to what we had." James's face crumpled, his hand slowly withdrawing from the table. "I don't understand, Emma," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "How could you do this to us? To me? I didn't want to," she sobbed. "I didn't want this to happen. I love you, James, but I'm not in love with you anymore. I can't pretend that I am." That night, Emma sat alone in their bedroom, the silence between her and James deafening. He had left after their conversation, too hurt to stay. She didn't know where he had gone, but she didn't feel like she could face him again, not yet. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the yearning to be with Nathan. She had broken James's heart, and in doing so, she had shattered the life she had known. She reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she unlocked it. There was a message from Nathan. "I miss you so much. I need you, Emma." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't replied to him in days, but in that moment, she knew what she had to do. She typed quickly, "I'm coming to you." She hit send, her heart racing as she stood up, her breath shallow. The choice was made. The life she had built with James was gone. And now, there was only Nathan. The days that followed Emma's decision felt like a whirlwind, a mixture of guilt, fear, and a strange, undeniable sense of liberation. She had crossed a line, one she couldn't uncross, and now the consequences were starting to weigh on her. The freedom she had felt when she chose Nathan, when she allowed herself to embrace the passion that had been missing for so long, was slowly giving way to a suffocating sense of responsibility. She had hurt James, torn apart the life they had shared, and now there was no going back. Nathan had been waiting for her, of course, his messages growing more intense as the days passed. She had responded, briefly, cautiously, but the temptation to be with him, to feel the connection they shared, was pulling her closer and closer to the edge. But the guilt that she had been running from, was no longer something she could ignore. Every time she looked at Nathan, Every time she felt the heat of his touch, a part of her felt alive in a way that James hadn't made her feel in years. But then there was the other part of her, the part that was tethered to the life she had with James, the part that had loved him so deeply. The part of her that was being destroyed by the truth. That evening, after spending yet another night with Nathan, Emma returned home, her mind a tangle of emotions. She had told herself she could handle this, that she could keep everything under control. But the cracks were showing, and they were widening by the day. She opened the door to their apartment, the silence hitting her immediately. James wasn't home yet, but she could feel his presence in the stillness, in the spaces between the walls where they had once shared laughter and love. Now, those spaces were empty, and the silence felt like an oppressive weight on her chest. Emma went to the bedroom, sitting down on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out quickly. A message from James: "We need to talk. I'm coming home now." Her heart sank. She knew what was coming. The conversation that had been hanging in the air for days, the one she had been avoiding, was finally here. And she wasn't ready for it. She wasn't ready to face him, to see the pain in his eyes. She had done this to him, to both of them, and now she had to live with the consequences. When James finally walked through the door, Emma was standing by the window, staring out at the city below. She couldn't bring herself to turn around when she heard his footsteps approach. His presence, though familiar, now felt like a stranger's. The man she had once known so well was no longer the person standing behind her. "Emma," James's voice broke through her thoughts. "I've been thinking about what you said. About everything." Emma turned around, her heart in her throat. She could see the exhaustion on his face, the deep sadness that had taken root in his eyes. The man who had once been her rock, her safe harbor, was now standing before her, lost and broken. "I've been trying to figure out how we got here," James continued, his voice trembling slightly. "How did we go from everything being perfect to this? To you telling me you don't love me anymore?" "I never wanted to hurt you," Emma said softly, her voice cracking. "I didn't want any of this to happen. But I've changed, James. I don't feel the same way anymore." James stepped closer, his eyes searching hers for any hint that she was lying, that she was still the woman he had married. "Then tell me, Emma. Tell me what happened. How could you throw everything away for someone else?" Emma closed her eyes, the weight of his words crashing down on her. "I don't know if I can explain it," she whispered. "What I feel with Nathan is different. It's real. And I can't deny it anymore. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, but I'm not the person you married. I've lost myself in this life, in our marriage. And I can't go back." The silence between them was unbearable, stretching out as James took a step back, his face etched with pain. "I gave you everything, Emma. And this is how you repay me." His voice was shaking now, the hurt evident in his tone. "I tried. I tried so hard to make you happy. To fix things between us. But I never stood a chance, did I?" Emma felt tears well up in her eyes. But she couldn't stop them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to destroy everything we had." James shook his head slowly, his gaze distant. "You already have, Emma. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." The words cut through her, but they were the truth. She had already lost him. The man who had once been her everything was now a stranger, a casualty of her own choices. That night, as Emma lay in bed alone, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had made, she realized that there was no easy way out. No way to undo the hurt she had caused, no way to go back to the life she had once known. Her life with James was over. And the life she had chosen with Nathan was still uncertain, fragile, and untested. The pain of betrayal, of losing everything she had built, was overwhelming. But so was the desire, the pull, the need for something more, something real. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Emma reached for her phone again, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. There was a message from Nathan, waiting for her, "I'm here. I miss you." She stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of what she had done. But she couldn't stop herself. She was already too far gone. She typed back, "I'll be there soon." The choice was made. The consequences would come later. But for now, all that mattered was the pull, the desire, the need to feel alive again. The days following Emma's final confrontation with James were filled with a constant sense of tension, as though everything in her life had suddenly shifted, and she was left struggling to find her balance. She had made her decision, but now she was living with the weight of that decision, an overwhelming mix of guilt and longing, of love and desire, all tangled together. James had left the apartment after their conversation, taking only a few belongings. He hadn't said much beyond the final exchange. He had been devastated, and Emma knew that nothing she could say would change the fact that she had broken him. She had seen the hurt in his eyes, the deep betrayal he felt, and yet the truth still hung in the air. She had fallen in love with someone else, but now, there was no turning back. Emma sat alone in their apartment, the silence filling the space like a suffocating cloud. The apartment, once full of life, now felt cold and empty. Every piece of furniture, every photograph, every object reminded her of the life she had left behind. The life that James had worked so hard to build, and the life she had torn apart. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. There was a message from Nathan, "I'm waiting for you. I can't wait to see you again." Emma stared at the message for a long time, her heart pounding in her chest. The temptation to respond immediately was overwhelming, but she knew she had to be careful. She was already walking a fine line, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep her emotions in check. The desire to be with Nathan was strong, but the reality of what she had done, what she was still doing, felt like an anchor pulling her deeper into the unknown. She typed back, "I'll be there soon." The moment she hit send, a weight seemed to lift off her shoulders. But the relief was short-lived. She knew that this choice, this moment, would define her future in ways she couldn't even fathom yet. She had already crossed a line, and now there was no way to turn back. When she arrived at Nathan's apartment, she was surprised to find him waiting for her outside, a look of anticipation on his face. The moment their eyes met, the air between them shifted, as though the space around them had been charged with something powerful and magnetic. He smiled at her, the intensity of his gaze making her heart skip a beat. "You came," he said softly, stepping closer to her. His hands reached for hers, his touch sending a rush of heat through her. "I had to." Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know what else to do. I can't keep pretending anymore." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumb gently brushing away a tear that had escaped from her eye. "You don't have to pretend with me, Emma. You never have to pretend." In that moment, Emma felt the truth of his words in the deepest part of her heart. She had been pretending for so long, pretending that everything was fine, pretending that she was happy, when the reality was that she had been drowning. And now, standing in front of Nathan, with his hands on her, she felt the weight of her choices, of her actions, but also the overwhelming sense of desire, of being seen and understood in a way that had eluded her for years. She didn't say anything as Nathan pulled her closer, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was slow and tender at first, but quickly deepened with urgency. His hands moved to her back, pulling her in closer, and she responded with the same intensity, letting herself give in to the feeling that had been building inside her for so long. The kiss was everything she had been craving, raw, passionate, and completely consuming. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma didn't have to think about the consequences. She didn't have to worry about what she had left behind. All that mattered in that moment was the connection they shared, the heat between them, and the way he made her feel alive again. When they finally pulled away, both of them breathless, Emma felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She had crossed a line, yes, but with Nathan, she didn't feel the same guilt that had plagued her when she was with James. With Nathan, she felt seen. She felt understood. She felt real. Later that night, as Emma lay in Nathan's arms, she couldn't help but think about everything she had left behind. She had hurt James, broken their marriage, and walked away from the life they had built together. She had chosen Nathan, but what did that really mean? She had never expected to be here, to be the kind of person who made such a choice. But the truth was that she had fallen in love with someone else. And as much as she knew the consequences would come, she couldn't bring herself to regret her decision. The next morning, Emma woke up to the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was a message from James. She hesitated before opening it, her stomach tightening in anticipation. "We need to talk. I'm coming over." Her heart dropped. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready to face the consequences. Could she keep living this double life? Could she continue to see Nathan, knowing that James would eventually find out? The truth, it seemed, was inevitable. And Emma knew she could no longer live in the shadows. The day after receiving James's message, Emma could barely focus on anything. She had spent the night in Nathan's arms, the comfort of his presence offering a temporary escape from the reality she had created. But as morning arrived, so did the inevitable, the consequences of her choices. She had told herself that she could live with them, that she had made the right decision for herself, but deep down, the reality was much more complicated. James's message hung in the air like a storm cloud, its dark weight pressing on her chest. He wanted to talk. He wanted answers. And Emma wasn't sure if she was ready to give them. The apartment was silent when she arrived home. There were no signs of life except the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of traffic outside. She stood by the door for a moment, her hand hovering over the knob, unsure if she was ready to face the man she had shared so much with, someone who still loved her, despite everything. She had betrayed him, and now, she had to confront the aftermath. As she walked into the living room, she saw James sitting on the couch, his posture tense, his hands folded in his lap. He looked tired, exhausted even, but there was a determined look in his eyes, one that said he wasn't leaving until he got the answers he needed. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but tinged with pain. "We need to talk. We can't keep going like this." Emma nodded, taking a deep breath as she sat across from him. She wanted to say something, to offer him some comfort, but the words wouldn't come. The guilt she had been running from rushed in, filling the space between them with a suffocating silence. James looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any sign that she was still the woman he had married. But all he saw now was a stranger, a woman torn between her past and her future, a woman who had betrayed everything she once held dear. "Is it him?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is it Nathan?" Emma closed her eyes, the question hitting her like a blow. She hadn't expected him to be so direct, but the question had been hanging in the air between them for days. The man she had once promised her life to now knew the truth. And there was no way to hide from it any longer. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's Nathan." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of everything they had lost. James closed his eyes for a moment, as though he needed to process the truth before responding. "I don't understand, Emma," he said softly, his voice breaking. "How could you do this to me? How could you do this to us?" Emma shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted any of this. But I've changed, James. I've fallen in love with someone else. And I can't pretend that I don't feel it anymore." James's face contorted with pain, but there was something else in his eyes, a quiet resignation. "I don't know how to fix this, Emma," he whispered. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can forgive myself," Emma replied, her voice barely audible. "But this is who I am now. I've made my choice, and I have to live with the consequences." The silence between them grew thick, filled with unspoken words and emotions they couldn't quite express. James stood up, his hands trembling as he wiped his face with the back of his hand. Emma watched him, her heart breaking as she realized how much she had destroyed in the process of finding herself. "Is this it?" James asked quietly. "Is this the end of us?" Emma didn't answer right away. She couldn't. The words were stuck in her throat. And she didn't know how to say goodbye to someone who had once meant the world to her. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I wish I could fix this. I wish I could go back to the way things were, but I can't. And I'm so sorry." James nodded, though the sadness in his eyes was unmistakable. "I don't know where we go from here, Emma. I don't know if we can go anywhere at all." He walked toward the door, his footsteps slow and heavy, as if the weight of their broken marriage was too much to bear. Before he left, he turned to look at her one last time, his gaze lingering. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said quietly. "But I can't be part of it anymore. I can't be the one who gets left behind." And with that, he was gone. Emma sat alone in the empty apartment, the silence pressing in on her like a physical force. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it had arrived, she felt unmoored, adrift in a sea of emotions. She had chosen Nathan, but what did that mean for her future? What did it mean for the woman she had been? She had spent so many years trying to build a life, trying to make herself into someone who could be proud of her choices. But now, she was faced with the reality of what those choices had cost her. She had hurt James, shattered their marriage, and walked away from everything they had built together. And yet, in her heart, she felt something different, a strange, dangerous pull toward Nathan, toward the life they could build together. It was raw, real, and full of passion. But was that enough? Could passion really be enough to replace everything she had lost? Emma closed her eyes, her hand resting over her heart. She had made her choice, but she was no longer sure where it would lead. She had crossed the line, and now, she would have to face the consequences, whatever they might be. The future felt uncertain, like an open road stretching out before her. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing on her, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the feeling that, for the first time in a long while, she was finally alive. The weeks that followed James's departure were filled with a quiet, aching solitude. Emma had expected to feel relief. After all, she had chosen Nathan, and in that moment, it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But relief didn't come. What she felt instead was a profound emptiness, as if her life had been torn apart, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She had left behind a life she had known for so long, a life that had been so familiar. Even if it had been suffocating. But now that it was gone, Emma couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake, if the choice she had made was the right one. The passion she had found with Nathan was undeniable, but the pain of losing James, of breaking his heart, was something she couldn't escape. It gnawed at her every waking moment. Nathan had been her escape, the promise of something different, something exciting. But even as she spent time with him, even as she felt his presence warm her, she realized that the weight of the consequences was always looming in the background. She couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how much she tried to move forward, the past would always haunt her. It was a Thursday evening when Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "I've been thinking about you. Let's get away for the weekend. I think we need a break." Emma stared at the screen for a moment, her heart racing. The thought of escaping to somewhere new, somewhere distant, seemed like the perfect opportunity to escape everything she was running from. She had spent too many days lost in her own guilt, in the emotional wreckage of her choices. Maybe a weekend getaway was what she needed to clear her head. She typed back, "That sounds perfect. Let's do it." The moment she sent the message, she felt a sense of anticipation, a sense of freedom. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. But even as she responded, a nagging voice in the back of her mind reminded her of the life she had left behind, of James, of everything she had destroyed. But there was no turning back now. The weekend came quickly, and Emma found herself sitting beside Nathan in his car, driving out of the city. The countryside rolled by in a blur, the green fields and quiet roads a welcome change from the chaos that had become her life. Nathan was beside her, his hand resting on the gearshift, and as he glanced at her, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. In his presence, she felt alive, as though she was finally stepping into the woman she was always meant to be. They arrived at a small cabin on the edge of a lake. The setting quiet and serene. It was the perfect escape. Nathan unpacked their things while Emma stood at the window, looking out at the expansive view. The lake shimmered in the sunlight, the forest surrounding it quiet and peaceful. Nathan joined her by the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "This is what we need," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her neck. "No distractions, just you and me." Emma closed her eyes, letting herself feel the warmth of his touch. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget about the life she had left behind, about the man who had once been her world. She had made her choice, and now, she was here with Nathan. She had to let go of the guilt. Even if it was just for this brief moment, they spent the day by the lake, hiking through the woods, and later, watching the sunset from the porch of the cabin. It felt like a dream, an escape from everything that had been weighing on her. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky darkened, Emma couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. The life she had left behind was still with her, even in this peaceful retreat. That night, as they sat on the couch together, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. Nathan was beside her, his hand resting on her thigh, but she felt disconnected, as though a part of her was still miles away. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had chosen Nathan, and yet, part of her still yearned for the life she had with James. She had abandoned him, and now, she had to live with the consequences. Nathan leaned in to kiss her, but Emma pulled back slightly, her mind racing. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. "I just..." Emma's voice faltered as she tried to gather her thoughts. "I can't stop thinking about everything I've lost. About James." Nathan's expression softened, and he reached for her hand. "I get it, Emma. This is hard. But you need to understand that you made the right choice. You don't have to keep looking back." She nodded, though her heart was heavy with doubt. She didn't know if she had made the right choice. Maybe she had chosen the passion, the freedom, the life she had always wanted, but in doing so, she had destroyed the man who had once loved her unconditionally. Could she really live with that? Could she live with the damage she had caused? The next morning, Emma woke up early, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. She got out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake Nathan, and went outside to sit on the porch. The air was cool, the smell of pine trees and fresh earth filling her lungs. She watched as the sunlight began to spread across the lake, casting golden hues on the water. It was beautiful here. Everything was quiet, peaceful. And yet, she felt torn. A part of her wanted to run back to the life she had left. To James, to the home they had built together. But another part of her, the part that had been awakened by Nathan, wanted to keep moving forward, to embrace this new chapter of her life, no matter how uncertain it was. As she sat there, deep in thought, her phone buzzed. It was a message from James. "I'm coming over today. We need to talk." Her heart stopped. She had known this moment was coming, but she wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to face the man she had betrayed, the man who still loved her. She had already made her choice, but could she really face the consequences of that choice? The message from James hung in the air, as if time itself had come to a standstill. The words on the screen blurred as Emma's mind raced. She hadn't expected this so soon. She had known it was coming, knew that there was no way to avoid the conversation, the reckoning she had been dreading, but now, faced with it, her heart beat wildly in her chest. She sat there on the porch of the cabin, the serene lake in front of her seeming almost cruelly calm compared to the storm raging inside her. Nathan was still asleep inside, unaware of the message that had just upended everything. The choices she had made, the life she had walked away from, felt all too real in this moment. "I'm coming over today. We need to talk." The simplicity of the message felt like a sharp knife, cutting through her carefully constructed resolve. James was coming, and there was no running from this conversation. Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, but the guilt twisted in her stomach. How could she face James after everything she had done? After betraying him so completely? The man who had given her everything, who still, despite everything, cared for her, how could she look him in the eye after breaking his heart? The truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know what to say, how to explain herself. or whether there was even a way to make things right. But she had to face him. She owed him that much. By the time Nathan stirred, Emma had already packed her things. She had made her decision. She had to leave the cabin. It wasn't that she didn't want to be with Nathan, but the weight of what was about to unfold was too much for her to ignore. She couldn't keep living a lie. And as much as she felt alive with Nathan, the reality of what she had left behind was something she had to confront, for better or worse. Nathan woke up slowly, his hand reaching out for her, but Emma pulled back just enough to avoid his touch. She could see the confusion in his eyes as he sat up, rubbing his face. "Emma, what's going on?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. "I need to go back," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I need to face James." Nathan looked at her, a hint of worry flickering in his gaze. "Are you sure? We've been running from this for so long." "Emma, don't you want to be free of him?" Her heart clenched at the truth of his words, but she couldn't shake the guilt that wrapped itself around her. "I've made my choice, Nathan. But I can't keep running from the consequences of what I've done. James deserves answers. I owe him that much." Nathan didn't say anything for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I get it, Emma. But just know that I'm here, no matter what happens. I'll be waiting for you." She nodded, her throat tight, and walked out of the cabin with a heavy heart. The weight of her choices was suffocating, but there was no turning back. The drive back to the city felt like an eternity. The silence in the car was deafening, Emma's mind consumed with thoughts of James, of what she had lost, and what she had yet to face. She kept replaying the conversations they had shared in her mind, the good, the bad, the love that had once defined them, and it all seemed so distant now. So fragile. The life she had built with James felt like it was a different lifetime, one that she had walked away from in pursuit of something more, something with Nathan. But what was that something? She still wasn't sure. Was it passion? Freedom? Or had she simply been running from herself? As she pulled up to the apartment, she saw James's car parked outside, waiting for her. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to face him, to face the damage she had caused. Inside the apartment, Emma stood at the doorway for a moment, gathering her courage before she walked in. She found James sitting on the couch, his posture stiff, his eyes hard. He had changed since she last saw him, his usual warmth now replaced by something colder, more distant. "James," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly. He looked up at her, his eyes dark with hurt. "You're here. I didn't think you'd come back. I thought you'd run again." His voice was quiet but cutting, and it stung more than she expected. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen." James stood up slowly, his eyes not leaving hers. "You don't have to apologize to me, Emma. You've already made your choice. I get it now. I can't change what's happened. But I need to know, was I ever enough for you?" The question hit her like a punch in the gut. She couldn't answer. She wanted to, but she couldn't. The truth was that, for a long time, James had been enough. But somewhere along the way, she had lost herself. And in finding Nathan, she had uncovered something she hadn't known she was missing. "I'm so sorry," she repeated, stepping closer to him. "I never wanted to hurt you." James looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers as if looking for the woman he had once known. But all he saw was someone else, someone who had become a stranger in his eyes. "I loved you, Emma." "I still do," James said quietly. "But I can't be with someone who isn't sure of me anymore. I can't keep holding on to a love that isn't there." The finality of his words struck her like a bolt of lightning. Emma opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The truth was undeniable. She had chosen Nathan. And now, she had to live with that choice. James turned away from her, walking toward the door. "I'll be gone in the morning. I can't stay here anymore. James, Emma called after him, but he didn't turn back. She stood there, feeling her heart break into pieces. She had broken him. She had torn apart everything they had built together, and now there was nothing left. That night, as Emma lay in bed, the weight of her actions pressed down on her like a crushing force. The life she had known was gone, and with it, the man who had once been her world. She had chosen Nathan, and yet, in this quiet moment, she couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. Her phone buzzed once more, the sound jarring in the silence of the room. She glanced at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. It was Nathan. I'm thinking of you. Let's talk tomorrow. She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the overwhelming flood of emotions. She had made her choice. But the consequences, those would follow her, always. The morning after James left, Emma woke up to an empty apartment. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the noise that had filled the space just days ago. The world outside was bright and full of possibility, but inside, everything felt muted, still, as if the weight of her decisions had stolen all the color from her life. She had spent the night thinking, reflecting on everything that had led her to this moment. The life she had built with James, the love she had once felt for him, all seemed so distant now. She had chosen Nathan, and now, she had to face the consequences of that choice. But what did that choice mean? Was she running towards something real, something genuine? Or was she simply escaping the life she had found herself trapped in? Emma couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Nathan. He had awakened something in her that she hadn't felt in years. His spontaneity, his energy, it was the freedom she had longed for, the excitement she had been missing. But with it came the painful reality of what she had lost. James was gone. And no matter how much she tried to hold on to the remnants of their relationship, she knew it was over. She reached for her phone, the device buzzing in her hand. It was Nathan again, his message a simple, direct invitation. I'm waiting for you. Come to me. The words made her heart race. She had already made her choice, but every time she thought of Nathan, the uncertainty crept back in. Was this what she truly wanted? Was this the life she had dreamed of, or was it simply a fleeting moment of desire, something that would fade just like everything else? Her mind drifted back to the time she had spent with James. The moments of quiet happiness they had shared, the shared memories of building their life together. She had betrayed all of that for something uncertain, something unknown. And yet, it was with Nathan that she felt alive in a way that she hadn't in years, but there was a price. There was always a price. She took a deep breath, her chest tightening with the weight of her decision. She had no answers. All she knew was that Nathan had become everything she had longed for, but it wasn't just about passion. It was more than that. He represented the freedom she had craved, the raw connection she had lost in her marriage with James. As the day wore on, Emma found herself standing by the window, staring out at the city. The sun was beginning to set, the sky painted with shades of pink and orange. And for a brief moment, everything seemed still. She thought about James, about the life she had left behind, and the man who had given her everything, only to have her walk away from it. Nathan had been a breath of fresh air, a reminder of the woman she used to be. But could she really let go of her past? Could she let go of the man who had once been her everything? Her phone buzzed again, this time a simple message from Nathan. Come to me, Emma. We can't keep doing this. The words were both an invitation and a warning, a call to action that Emma knew she couldn't ignore. She had already made her choice, but now, it was time to face the reality of it. She had to go to him. She had to see him. To feel the fire that had drawn them together. She couldn't keep pretending that the life she had with James was enough. Her heart was racing, and as she made her way toward the door, she realized there was no going back. The choice had been made. The life she had once known was gone, replaced by something new, something that held both promise and danger. Nathan's apartment was just as she remembered it, modern, clean, yet filled with an energy that seemed to pulse in the air. When Emma entered, Nathan was already waiting for her, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and expectation. He was the embodiment of everything she had been missing, everything she had craved in her life. "Emma," he said softly, stepping toward her, his hand reaching for hers. His touch was warm, familiar, and the moment he made contact with her skin, the space between them closed. He pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers with the same urgency that had marked their first kiss. The kiss deepened quickly, their passion unraveling in the quiet of the room, but as they kissed, Emma couldn't escape the weight of her choice. She was here with Nathan, but part of her was still caught in the life she had left behind, still struggling with the love and loyalty she had once felt for James. Nathan broke the kiss, his forehead resting against hers as he whispered, "We don't have to hide anymore. Emma. It's just us now." Emma closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was the life she had chosen, and though she knew it wasn't going to be easy, it was the only life that felt real to her now. She had to let go of her past, of the man who had once been her everything, and embrace the future with Nathan. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice steady, though her heart ached with the weight of everything she had left behind. "I'm ready." The days that followed were filled with both excitement and uncertainty. Nathan made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced, but even in the moments of joy, there was an underlying sadness, a sense of loss. She had made her choice, but it was a choice that had cost her everything. James was gone. The life she had built with him was a distant memory. And now, there was only Nathan, her future, her present, the person who made her feel whole, even as the ghosts of her past continued to haunt her. Emma sat by the window, looking out at the city below. She had chosen Nathan, but the consequences of her actions were still fresh in her mind. She had walked away from one life to embrace another, but the price of that choice was steep, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it, but she had made her decision. And now, she had to live with it.